essentially just a bit of a defense of Godzilla Kong New Empire, as well as, I guess, a broader defense of the monsterverse and just the state that it's in. Because I feel that, I guess, in the overall fandom, as well as also being inspired by certain, uh, or like my friends through the stream grapevine or whatever, within this little circle here, to where essentially I just want to present why I am a fan of both where the monsterverse is heading and like where we're at now, or where we were at with starting with Godzilla versus Kong, to today, where we have the upcoming Godzilla X Kong 3, directed by Grant Spatore. We have the upcoming Monarch Season 2, and perhaps some more Monsterverse external material with the comic for the Skull Island anime, which I was a fan of. And to start out, basically, essentially, here are the reasons why I love Godzilla Kong the New Empire. To keep it short and sweet, everything about it tickles my fancy in a way that it adheres to my tastes in what I want to see in films. Things like that are, quickly paced action, a sense of levity throughout the like um like the thrilling or horrific moments, or as well as just like a fun ensemble cast of characters, who are explored thoroughly enough to where I get a sense of who they are. I care about them. I want to see them succeed. And those things overall are what make a great film to me. And I've gone on the record saying that I could acknowledge certain flaws with the film, either technically or narratively, that, I agree that there are certain films that, or in my case, I believe there are films that, or any sense of media or any art, can have flaws, but can still be great in spite of them. And what I mean by that is, in a sense, it can be subjective. In other cases, it might be, objectively. Objectively, there's enough material in that is done well to where narrative flaws seen here and there are outweighed by all of the good material that's in there. And subjectively, I think that's true as well. I think subjectively, any of the flaws can hold back the experience for you. And I think in those cases, it's a matter of taste. So if you're not into either the tones or the executions of a certain piece of media, if there are flaws within that media as well, that'll probably hold it back from you enjoying the overall work of art, or anything else for that matter. Subjectively, I do love the film because a lot of what is contained within it is stuff I love. I like I said, I love the action, and not even just the action, but the character moments that we have with the monsters. The monsters in this film, to some extent more than others, definitely, but they are treated as characters in the film. And the one that we explore the most is Kong, and it's not only his story but the one with Gia that I think it was a good move that they had the arcs be similar, if not the same, to one another in the film. And what I think is great about the film is it tells a really good story. It's a story of two individuals who are starting to go their own paths, and they are let's see, what's the word? Their troubles are that they cannot seem to fit in their own society, and so through means of either the plot or through their own devices, they are seeking out a sense of belonging. And they go through it in different ways to where ultimately, in the end, what they have to do is they have to rise up to the challenge in order to, in a sense, save their people once they found them. And I think that's a pretty good story. And I think this story told here is told pretty well. As I said, there are narrative flaws with the film, but I don't think that they hold the film back from being a great story. Because, for instance, I think the story told with Kong is very well written, and that's due to the fact that what we see of him in the film is very, I would say it's very like coherent, given that it's all told mostly through visual storytelling. And it sort of goes hand in hand with me needing to provide examples. For instance, we see throughout the film that Kong in the beginning is very lonely, and even though he is seemingly able to thrive in the Hollow Earth now that he has made it his new home, he still is searching for a sense of belonging due to the fact that he is seemingly the last of his kind. As he hunts, he is shown to, in several instances, get a sense of enjoyment in the hunt. He is thriving in the case that, he's doing well for himself, better than he was in the previous movie, to where he was contained to a small island in a diminishing habitat. And now we're finding that he is out in the open in his open world home of the Hollow Earth. And so, despite that, he is still personally very lonely and isolated. And in the sense that not even Gia, who in the previous film was giving him some sense of belonging, is now doing her own thing up top. And in tandem, she herself is uh, not doing well in the same personal level, to where she is also seemingly the last of her people. She is very much isolated, as the film tells us and somewhat shows us as well, to where she is seen first off like alone heading to school. The setting is very like drab, and we also know that she is experiencing something abnormal due to her heritage and like where her people come from. And that's causing her a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, on top of what she's already said to be experiencing. And so that way we're able to empathize with her and her situation, since we know that she's being connected to Kong, who we also see is experiencing similar struggles. And so we're easily able to connect the two storylines and get what the theme is. And like, how far would you go to find your sense of belonging? And we see Kong has been, going deeper into the sections of Hollow Earth. We see that he's going out into far off places, and we even see that in an instance where Kong believes that he's hearing the call of another member of his people, he beelines it towards the sound and is disappointed and sad that it's just a parrot frog. And then on top of that, he's aching from his tooth, so things are not going well for them. And that sets up the character arc very nicely and the theme of the story. And we see that throughout the film, to where he continually is shown to rise up to the challenge, both of them. And as they continue to go on their journey, they are finding that sense of belonging that they're craving. We see Kong. He's visually both him and Gia are visually more upbeat and happy. We see them smile more throughout their journey as Kong finally finds his people when he meets Zuko and One Eye, plus the other apes. And then when Gia starts discovering the ruins of the Iwi people, they are starting to discover more of themselves, and they are starting to thrive even more now that they have the companionship of their own people, which that connects them to who they are. So I think, and visually, it's all done very well. You can see the emotion on Kong. You can see the emotions on Gia, and so we empathize with them even more. So that's one thing that I really like about the film, and I think is done well. Is it done to a great in depth um, way as to something like Godzilla minus one? And of course, I'm already bringing in the comparisons to minus one, which was a big, I guess, controversial take, to where people said you couldn't compare them because they were two different things. And that's one aspect of the fandom that I think was largely misinterpreted or just flat out wrong, because I was always of the opinion that you can have two different films and still compare them. Because the only way you can really compare them in good faith, I would say, is if you compare a lighthearted film to this serious drama film. You can only compare them in the sense that how well they each tell their own stories. And, there's some instances in minus one where if you really look at it, there's some aspects to where narratively it's held back by a few things, but all the good stuff is outweighed in a similar way to Kong. Now, if you compare them, I would say subjectively, I think it does the job. Godzilla Kong, the New Empire, does the job as well as minus one. Um, and so, because Godzilla Kong's purpose is to just have a good time with the monsters and the story, and I never saw that as a bad thing to have that as your goal. And juxtapose that with Godzilla minus one, where its purpose is to explore these characters and explore it through the lens of Godzilla. It's a story about overcoming survivors' grief, learning to be content with the life you're living, and learning to find the strength to go on and live after tragedy. And it's a complete 180 from what Godzilla X Kong is. Godzilla X Kong, you want to have a good time. Whereas with minus one, it's a film where it wants you to, it's not that it doesn't want you to have a good time. It's still a monster movie at the end of the day. And, even with things like horror, there's a way to have fun with it, but it's a very different camp entirely. And another thing that I love about Godzilla X Kong is the monster action itself, and not just the action, but the monster moments. Because one thing I saw leading up to even Godzilla versus Kong is talk of all the monster action that was going to be in it, and then with this film especially, that was always brought up. And whenever that happens, it's always in the sense it's called monster action, because I guess some people had the expectation that it was just going to be like the monsters fighting and everything, but if you really get down to the nitty gritty of it, it's not just about the monster action, it's about the moments and the writings surrounding the monsters and them as characters. Like I said before and showed and expressed before, the film revolves around Kong finding his people, finding a sense of belonging, and how far is he going to go to achieve that, and how that affects him. And I would say the moments we get with him and Tsuko, him hunting, all of that, that's not just monster action. It's character writing for a monster. It's treating them as a character in the film, and we're seeing his journey throughout. And as I said before, I think it's a very well done or well told story. You're able to easily understand the character, his wants, and you're able to see how the story affects him. And I think you're easily able to empathize with his struggles, and you're able to root for him along the way. And I think both the Wingard films are able to do that. Because I've said before in previous streams, such as on the Zimcast, where we talk about it, I believe that you're able to comprehend things from the film pretty easily if you, for one, allow yourself to suspend your disbelief and just think of like what's the most logical conclusion, or logically what's likely that Wingard was trying to express. Because as I've said before, I was able to make certain conclusions about the film, and later down the line, when context was officially given, I was right on the money for the most part of a lot of it. And like honestly, like I was just on the money because I was able to assume certain things about the film as I was watching it, taking in all the information, and able to come up with a logical conclusion. And while I agree that in certain aspects it is a narrative flaw that I had to do that in some sense, but I also feel that it's largely stated that film shouldn't hold your hand with certain things. Like I think it's fine for films to expect the audience to come to their own conclusions about things based on the visual information shown. Because I'll also, admit to the fact that the film is held back by certain elements not being as explained, but it's easily shown as well. For instance, the issue with not knowing how the whip slash crystal, how it works, or at least an explanation as to how it works. When I was able to easily come up with my own logical conclusion that was somewhat supported by the external material, based simply on the fact of the information I've had up to that point. But I mean, there's even an explanation that the crystal is able to somehow inflict pain onto Shimo whenever Scar King wills it, or whenever he applies pressure to it. And so I can come up with my own conclusions. The one I did was the crystal is able to either create a telepathic signal or just a sound signal that when Scar King wields it and applies pressure to it, it generates that signal and then causes Shimo pain. And then I could further infer that since the crystal appears to be similar in shape and color to the ones across her body, perhaps the crystals function in some way to where it can generate that signal to other members of the species or other titans as well. And in some cases, that's to inflict pain on others telepathically or through the sound signals. Because visually it's shown on screen whenever she's in pain, she tosses her head, she bangs it on the walls, on the floor, in a way that is visually alluding to like she's hearing something or she's telepathically seeing something in her mind. And so in that way, I can easily conclude, and a lot of it is confirmed later down the line, like the crystal causes pain. In the visual novel, or in the novel for Godzilla Kong New Empire, it's alluded to the fact that yes, the crystal is a part of Shimo's body. And I was able to easily come to those conclusions and have it somewhat confirmed in external material because I was able to analyze the material shown to me and come up with my own conclusions. And that was satisfying to me because I like the idea that that could be the case, and it was to a certain extent. And so I can have a good time with the rest of the film, even if narratively it can do better in explaining certain things. But because I was able to come up with my own satisfying conclusion based on what I saw, and I was able to have a good time with it, and I think it was well done because of that. Because it didn't, and I think in some ways, if it had, people would have complained that it was too exposition heavy. And in some cases, they already are. Or at least not in the case of it being exposition heavy, but in stating what we've already seen. But if people are complaining about that, then I don't see why they wouldn't complain about some of those other stuff. And I would only not think that if there was even further push for the visual storytelling. But I think it was already doing a fine job. So it's to each their own, I guess, with that matter. But ultimately, I think it was able to convey information well enough to where if you pay attention and suspend your disbelief in certain cases, because how much do you have to suspend your disbelief to come to those conclusions I did? I would say not that much, because it's already introduced the elements of telepathy. It's already introduced the elements of the Titans having certain ways of communicating through signals, through extraordinary senses, stuff like that. So I think it's done a well enough job of world building to where you have these concepts. When you see elements on screen that imply those concepts are being applied, you can easily come with the conclusion that it's either one of those concepts. And in that sense, you can continue your enjoyment of the film because the film trusts you enough to understand that there are these concepts in the universe. And when it shows it visually without needing to explain it to you, you'll understand it. And then, so that's one of my basic defenses is as to why at least I was able to enjoy the film and why I think it's good. Forgive me again, because I know on some occasions I've been asked to explain certain things better. So I hope that I was able to help narrow down my views on it. I did have the help of some good friends who are very generous in my viewpoints because they have I appreciate the confidence in me explaining my point of view as to why I enjoy these films. And I've already said my gripes with the film as to the amount of information told, how well that information is conveyed narratively. I think there are some cases where it can be better, but everything is outweighed by my enjoyment of what I'm seeing done well already. And I've also seen a lot of people have some flat out wrong takes. For instance, I guess if you want to explain the whole plot hole of Godzilla Evolved and why that's a thing, the reason. So I guess if you want to go down this one, this is just addressing the whole Godzilla Evolved and whether or not it makes sense. Here's how I make sense of it. So throughout the film, and so we know that thermonuclear Godzilla is a thing. When he absorbs enough radiation, he is able to turn that into his own energy and into heat, pure heat. The reason he was going to die, as it was implied in King of the Monsters, was because he took in all that energy too much at once. He had a nuke blown up in his face, and because of that, he was going to overload, and it is implied that he would have died without Mothra's help. Mothra's energy, as we saw, as it went into his body, that energy helped him contain it. And as we see in Godzilla X Kong, we see that he is storing up the energy gradually, slowly. And at the start of the film, he's absorbing this energy, he's generating all this heat from it. So he's essentially going into like a lighter version of the thermonuclear mode into this new Godzilla energized mode. And we see that it's causing him to have heat. And he's mainly doing this at first, not only to evolve, but also to take on Tiamat, who's already been absorbing the information or the radiation from her lair. And it's also explained to us that the energy in her lair is specifically from the solar flares. And so, again, the sun associated with heat. Everything's pointing to Godzilla needing this mode in order to combat specifically Shimo's ice powers. And so everything around this Godzilla evolved design is to generate heat in order to better combat Shimo and her ice powers. And so, and all of that is done through both visual storytelling and information, exposited. It tells us that it shows us he's heating up. It tells us we see how he is reacting to all this radiation he's absorbing. And, it's easy to grasp the concept. Okay, so this evolved state is going to better help him regulate his heat from the energy he absorbs and that he has in his body. So, yeah, I think that's set up pretty well. We see that after he takes down Tiamat, he goes in there, goes through a pretty rapid evolution that takes up a lot of his energy. And he also just gets basic upgrades in his spikes and his athletic build. And so, hello, Gojuman Swiss, if you're still here. Thank you for stopping by. And so, yeah, and then that goes into the other plot holes of why he hasn't done this before. I would say, it's probably because, perhaps Shimo is just an enemy that requires this. Because it's also implied that they've fought before. We see on the murals that they've had an encounter, and it was likely that she was involved somehow, since we see that Scar King during the war has the whip slash with the crystal. So he probably had control of Shimo by then, and that's probably what led to the Ice Age, or at least after the fact, because it's never stated implicitly that the last Ice Age was when the Titan War happened, or if it was sometime afterwards. I would have to double check. But then there's also, hello, cat or dog, welcome to the stream. There's talking about Godzilla and Kong. But yeah, I would say it's just because I would say it's a problem from the beginning of the monsterverse. Because we have instances in where Godzilla will not do anything unless the threat is immediate. For instance, he never stopped the emerging or the hatching of the Muto eggs when the film says multiple times that there are signals being emitted from the eggs that Godzilla is also responding to. Or at least he should be able to sense those and hear them. But he doesn't do anything until they immediately hatch. And then there's the matter of in King of the Monsters where Ghidorah is defeated by being trapped in ice and Godzilla doesn't, go in to finish the job. And then I would argue it's consistent to his character, to where he won't do anything until the threat is imminent. But as to why he didn't involve, hard to say. I would say that I can suspend my disbelief in that he probably didn't like need to evolve, but it's not that he didn't require the energy, because you also have the myth of I don't know how to say it. I say true, thank you. Yeah, well, I hope you can understand what I'm saying, but back to the point. I or back to the point is that I think, considering you have the whole myth of Godzilla's called the Titan who ate a star, and the best visualization you have that I would say is very implied was him eating the radiation, and it looks like he's eating a star. So obviously he's had to do. Hello, Madzilla edits. Howdy, howdy. We know that he's done energy absorption before, so we can infer then that he's had to enter either energized or other different states of evolution in order to fight enemies like Ghidorah, like Shimo. So he's done this before, and he's only narrowly won. He never won to the point where he was strong enough to defeat them, but because they were not an imminent threat anymore, because either Godzilla trapped them in the subterranean realm or Ghidorah was blocked in ice. And I know there's the whole retcon of Shimo was likely the one who did it, which I think there's a scenario in my head canon to where that can happen. Because I mean, like technically lore wise, Godzilla shot down Ghidorah, who fell into Antarctica, and I can see a world where Shimo was there, just there waiting, because that was her domain. This is probably sometime before Scar King got a hold of her, and they fought, and then got trapped in the subterranean realm, which I can see that happening. Um, but yeah, like that would be my rationale based on everything um, I know of how they've portrayed Godzilla. And yeah, like he isn't one to go after Titans needlessly. He will need it'll be any reason, but he'll always have a reason. The reason he fought Tiamat and ultimately killed her was because he needed the quickest way to get the radiation he needed in order to evolve. He and so it was either she got out of there, which she didn't. He gave multiple roars in order to ward her off, which is something he does. We know that in between battles, before and or after, he will roar, like his dominance roar or his alpha call, whatever. He did it to Kong several times to where he like roared at him, but he would not submit. Therefore, he had to either outright kill him or leave him to die. He also roared at Scylla in the beginning, and Scylla continued to attack. So we know that he has a tactic. He'll roar, he'll fight if they don't retreat or submit, and sometimes he'll give them those chances, sometimes not. And I know that it's kind of, I know with D-Man's videos, it's been retconned to being Scylla, but it was also a different Titan. But if it's still Scylla, then that means there's history there to where she's been a problem before and being a problem now. So she's probably run out of chances. But yeah, so we have this way of how they write Godzilla. Is it the best? Probably not, since there's still room to call out that he should probably take care of these problems. But like we know people who won't deal with things that aren't immediate problems. Maybe he's that kind of character. Probably is, considering each movie has that same problem, to where Godzilla will not stop anything that isn't immediate. And that goes further into discussing the whole thing of why he never stopped Kong. He never saw Kong as a problem or an immediate problem until he left Skull Island, because his status as a Titan then changed. He was isolated on the island, as that film explains, so Godzilla didn't see him as an issue. He wasn't going to impose any threat to the balance and or people. So long as he was on the island, Godzilla didn't need to go after him. It was only after he left that he chased after him, and the purpose was either, like I've said, to either make him submit or to kill him. And since in the film it's shown that both him being like outright defeated, because I don't think he was up for a fight considering he fell unconscious moments after, and also the military bowing on his behalf with the turning off all the power. Godzilla saw that as submission, which is why they probably couldn't leave, because if they did, it could be perceived, or at least the characters believe they could be perceived as a breach of the submission. And then let's see, Goji Man Swiss. The star is radiation, I think, or hollow earth energy. In the last one, we see radiation French. We saw it before too. My question is, yeah, I'd say it's easy to assume that he did that same thing with the hollow earth energy, which we saw in Godzilla vs. Kong. That blue, it's described as radiation from the core, but yeah, he does eat hollow earth energy, or at least is sustained through it, as most times are, from what they explain in the film. So the radiation from the core is a special kind of power that directly is the power source of the Titans, or at least one of the main sources, I would say. We also see similar energy throughout the Hollow Earth, so it makes sense that there are certain energy stockpiles, which is why I say that it's not implied that he hasn't gone through similar stages of evolution before in order to fight the other monsters. Because he's known as the Titan that ate the star. So, and we see that the visual similarities between him eating radiation connects that line, or that way he's described. So it's implied that he's done this before in some sense. Like at most, I would say he's gone into the Godzilla energized state, which is probably how he defeated them, or nearly defeated them. Because like the only way he could defeat Scar King and Shimo was to trap them. And we've seen that before, and it's a trope before, to where if they can't kill the enemy, they will, find some other way to like beat them. Because there's different ways to defeat somebody. But yeah, like that's just my rationale for it. And it's all based on information I've taken from the monsterverse. And like I said, I think it's fine. I think it's like valid to come to certain logical conclusions based on information you have. I would say it's akin to the whole well, thank you, Goji Man Swiss. I'm glad you think my voice is nice, because I'm a little insecure about my voice, specifically how it sounds through audio. But thank you, I appreciate that. Oh, let's see. There's also something I wanted to do, but I am sharing a link down below, which is basically if you want to get into streaming. I use StreamYard as a platform, and StreamYard gave me this little referral link to where you can go down below, click the link, and I guess there's a 10% discount code there too, where you can check out StreamYard, sign up. It's a free basic website, but you get more if you sign up for their just to get you're able to bring on more guests. You're able to go on for longer streams, and StreamYard's very good. I like it as a platform. But yeah, there's that referral link in the comments, so probably be in the description as well. But yeah, there's that. And so, yeah, back to this. I would say it's akin to Omni Viewer's video on staying in the room, and I would say that's like how I interpret that. To where if you're able to use the information you have to come to the logical conclusions, that's essentially the film being able to accurately, or not accurately, but um, appropriately, um, provide the story for you. Um, and again, like that's the whole thing of suspending your disbelief, because suspending your disbelief, you have to work for it too. Because if the film has to explain every little thing to you, then it's not a good story being told. I think as a writer, you should trust your audience to pick up on what you're trying to say. And of course, you have to obviously set up the every element of your story. No problem. Again, that's just the referral link to if you ever want to start streaming. Like you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it. Um, I think that's just something to where I get. It helps me out. Yeah, so don't worry about Goji Man. It's just in general for anyone who sees the stream. But yeah, so there's that. Da, 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 da. So again, I think this film does well in providing the setup and providing the information to where you can make your own logical conclusions, and then enjoy the rest of the film because you suspended your disbelief, and you you're able to come to that conclusion. I think it's fine for the audience because it's not writing the film for the writers. Because as I've said, I was able to come to logical conclusions that were confirmed, if not outright alluded to in external material. Another small plot hole, I guess. It's a very small one. It was one that was brought up in a D-Man video specifically. D-Man 1954 made this, I guess, well, he said that it's a plot hole that when Eileen Andrews goes to inspect the cameras, it's weird that it shows multiple screens from the other cameras when she only had the one that survived. But it's not true because if you watch the film, it's shown that all of the screenshots and all of the clips are from that one video. They're not taken from any of the other videos which were destroyed. Um, but all of the screenshots and all of the video feeds, they're from that one camera. So it's not a plot hole because we can see that all of those shots are from the one camera we saw. We saw it in real time and then we saw it played back. So there's that. And then one thing that I know people missed because a lot of the people I streamed with also missed it was the whole like plot convenience of the Beast Glove. Um, and I wouldn't call it a blink and you'll miss it because the first time and every time I watched it, I caught it to where if you listen to the interview at the beginning of the film, the interviewer name drops Project Powerhouse, and it's set up as like I think the line is like secret technology or like secret project technology projects such as Project Powerhouse, um, or like classified technology stuff like that. So the Beast Glove was set up from the beginning, and the way it played in my head, I was like, Project Powerhouse, what's that? And then I remembered, oh yeah, there's this thing called the Beast Glove. So that's probably what they're calling it here, or at least that's just what the project name is. and then later down the line it's set up that when it's appearing on screen and stuff, we see that it's also like it's like uh re or reverse engineered stuff from Mechagodzilla. It's from that same technology, and so there's a setup for that as to why they have it. Because honestly, if they have mechs now, they can have like mechanical augmentations too. Let's see. How many meters tall is Godzilla? How many meters tall is Godzilla? Some of you say 165, some of you say 300. I can't understand. What is the height Godzilla monsterverse? Well, in the Toho films, it varies. So if you want to take the original Godzilla, what we call the Showa period, those are the very early ones from the 50s through the 70s. That Godzilla is 50 meters tall, in that range. And then in the later movies, it can go from either like like 100 or so meters, and then it fluctuates every now and again. And then in the MonsterVerse, I know that he is 300 something feet tall, and I think that's like 100 something meters. So like, let's see. Let me look it up. Let's see. Godzilla MonsterVerse. MonsterVerse height. So yeah, he's like 393 feet tall, and that's about 119 meters or so. It might be different now. I think that's specifically like the King of the Monsters height stats. But yeah, I would say like based on the information that you mentioned here, I would say he's like 365 probably, and that's meters. But like he's like 300 something feet tall. So it's just a matter of the unit of measurement. And it's different for all the other Toho films. So it would just be like which ones you want to know specifically. But yeah, back to the thing at hand. Let's see. And then I guess if we want to talk about how well the arcs were treated, I would say the arcs in the movie were treated fairly well. The main ones are obviously Kong and Geo's arcs into them. Like how far are they gonna go to Heisei's 300? No, Heisei is not 300 meters. At the beginning, Heisei was specifically 80 meters tall, I believe, and then he grew to like be 100 meters in some of the later films. So Heisei is 100 meters tall, or so in that range. But yeah, like the arcs are very well laid out. Gia's arc is, just finding a sense of belonging. And like, how far is she gonna go? She is gonna fulfill her destiny of awakening Mothra in order to protect her people. And I know there's the whole issue of the whole prophecy thing. And I don't know if I really see it as a problem. I know there's the whole issue of like fate and like what that implies for the universe, but I don't know, because I mean, the prophecy also wasn't that she would save the world. The prophecy was always she would just awaken Mothra. Like she was destined to do this, but like I also don't see it as like, I don't know. I guess it's a thing. Like in general, prophecies I think are okay because you can always contextualize it as it's just what logically would happen because the characters are logically going to make that choice. It's not like they wouldn't make the choice either way. But I guess that's just a whole nother discussion that I don't know if I already have the understanding to fully acknowledge. But I don't know. Like, again, it's not the prophecy. It's just that she would awaken Mothra. Yes, I do love Mothra's theme from King of the Monsters. That's a very good theme. And then, yeah, there's the whole case of Mothra too. So Mothra, I think, yeah. So Mothra, I think, is pretty well set up. If you pay attention again, the setup is there from the beginning. I think one thing, I don't know if anyone's really talked about it, but I remember, well, at least from my perspective, I always thought that in the vision that Gia had at the beginning, all of the little white speckles were, I always thought it was implied to be snow, but it's actually Mothra's silk from the barrier, which we later see is there at the barrier throughout the film, or when they're going to the barrier. And it's later revealed that it's Mothra's silk barrier. So, and then there's also a glimpse of the mural, which they later find as well in the vision. So Mothra is set up from the beginning there. And then, of course, they find Mothra's barrier. There's also the Mothra mural, which sets her up. And then there's the whole, like, how exactly is Mothra coming back? This is another thing that was something that I was able to come to a logical conclusion, and that logical conclusion was, like, later confirmed in the novel and external material. And essentially Mothra is able to, in a sense, like, manipulate her energy or her life force or her soul, if you will. We saw in King of the Monsters, she's able to instill that soul into Godzilla in order to help him survive the overload. And then also in the film, we can see that Mothra's energy is still around. And I say that because we can see that Mothra can influence insects. In King of the Monsters, when she was giving birth, and I think, or no, when she was in the cocoon, emerging from the cocoon, all of the insects fluctuate to her. And, so there's, like, the whole insect manipulation thing. We see that, and I guess it's inferred, or you can infer, that the little light bug that Gia is guided by, that is Mothra's influence. So her spirit is connected to the Hollow Earth, Sri Lanka village, I think it's called, or Sri Lanka, or the Iwi village. Like, her energy is around, but she doesn't have a conduit to come back and form into physical matter. And so Gia, who has been set up as being able to sense Titans, she has similar senses to the Titans themselves outside of just the telepathy. And it's also explained that her being deaf also helps in being able to channel that sense, because she was able to predict when Godzilla was coming for them before any of the Navy, like either the personnel or the machines, were able to predict the movement. And then she was also able to sense Kong when he was coming through the portal before he actually came through. And so she's set up as being able to sense these things. And so in the film, we see that she's doing the similar thing to where when she first sensed Godzilla, she was able to outreach her hand and sense the vibrations in the air of the energy that Mothra is. Okay, so I see your question, Goji Man. And so here's the official thing, to where this specific element probably should have been set up better, because it is sort of set up to where we know from external material and in, I guess, in the film of King of the Monsters, the way Mothra works is that she's reincarnated, biologically speaking, through genetic memory, and like essentially she's cloning herself each time. So it's implied that there was like the first Mothra, and the Mothra we see in Godzilla Kong: The New Empire is like the first Mothra. And it's sort of set up to where when Eileen says her lineage goes back further than we thought, so we know that, Mothra has a lineage. There's going to be like a point where she's at her oldest point. That is the Mothra. So it's not the same Mothra as the one from King of the Monsters, but in a way it is, because her memories are the same. So like it's just a clone of herself each time. Yeah, and she instills her spirit into Godzilla, and King of the Monsters, which again we see in a similar way. She's able to, using Gia as a conduit, like a lightning rod, to funnel all that energy and condense herself into physical form. Uh, which I guess you can say is it's a weird element to bring into the MonsterVerse, but again, Mothra is like meta, like in terms of the meta of the lore, of the broader lore of the Godzilla franchise. Mothra is like the spiritual monster. She is part of the spiritual world, and so it's easy to conclude, oh, they're probably going that same route, because like most, if not all, Mothras are that same way. And then of course, there's the whole spirit manipulation thing, which we saw. And so yeah, so like her energy is basically funneling into, using Gia as a conduit to manifest her physical form. And then that was, again, like I was able to come to that conclusion. I wouldn't say on my first watch, somewhat my first watch and my next watches, but then again, that whole thing was confirmed in the novel when I read it, or read that part. Like, yeah, so I was able to come to that conclusion. It's, I'm sorry, Goji man. I know the English is not. I don't know if I'm not explaining it well, or I don't know how to properly explain it too. Because I would say the spirits are different, but the memories are the same. It's a little tricky thing about the way they explain the reincarnation. So, like, essentially, her mind is the same, but the spirits can be different. I guess, I mean, yeah, I'd say learning English is pretty good. You can do a lot with it. Being, learning different languages is beneficial in every capacity. But yeah, like that's the case to where, like, there's, yeah, you're welcome if you're able to help understand, like, because Michael Dougherty from King of the Monsters explained that every time she gives birth, she passes on her memories. So essentially, she's the same. She's the same, like, mind, but I guess each spirit is different. So that's why I think Mothra was pretty well set up. And like, there's this whole narrative of they switched her out last minute when, um, it's been stated, that Mothra was always supposed to be in the film. The film was written that way. The only reason they took her out was because they, Legendary at first couldn't get the rights or didn't want to get the rights. And then after the initial test screenings, um, the audiences didn't like the new monster. So then Legendary had incentive to bring Mothra in, and so all they really had to do was like just replace Phosphora with Mothra. And yeah, so they just, rewrote, like they essentially word switched Phosphora with Mothra, because he was essentially playing the same role. And then Mothra has a lot of cool stuff in the movie, which I also really like. And so there's that. And I guess I'll go into next. I am AFK 1 minute. Well, if that means you're gonna head out, thank you for stopping by. And if that just means you're going to get something, sure. I'll still be around either way. But yeah. So then there's the whole thing with Scar King. Everyone says Scar King is introduced too late, but he's not. He's introduced at the start of the film again. It's his eye we see in the monitor, and I think it's easy to understand because that's how I always, saw it. It's clear; it has the same eyes. So Scar King is introduced early on. We also feel his presence through not just Zuko, but also all the other Red Apes and One Eye who he fights along the way. We see his rampage and him destroying the outpost and his handprints on the wall, which we further connect to all of the stripes that we see on the Red Apes. So he's, sensed throughout. And then he also has a killer intro. His appearance in the Monsterverse is one of the best villain intros, I think, in the Monsterverse. Every time, I get giddy every time I see the Scar King coming in the frame when he's emerging from his lair or the throne room. I think that's a really cool shot. And there's the fight where, I would have, and then there's this thing, it's coming through line. I love the fight with Scar King. I agree that I don't think I don't know if it should have is the right phrase, but I would have appreciated if it was longer, if there was more action in that sense. But I don't think it's bad for not having it, and that's something that I come to. When it comes, that's a notion that I come back to every time someone says, "Oh, this should have been longer. This should have been better. It should have been done this way." I'm like, yeah, that's all nice, but I don't fault the film or see the film as lesser for not having that, because I think it's done well enough for what it is. And this is something I said before, but I don't judge a fish for not being able to climb a tree. I don't judge a fish for, I don't know, maybe how fast it swims. It could have swam better, but it swims well enough, so I'm not going to fault it for not swimming better or faster, because, again, I love everything that film does, and I think it's fine for a film to wanting more, because I think, it's only going to give you more down the line. And then again, if you don't like what there is, or you don't like that it doesn't give you more, that's fine. I get it. I don't see it that way. I know some of my friends were disappointed with the Scylla and Tiamat fights. And I agree in the sense that I would have loved longer fight scenes, but I'm not mad at it for not having that, because I love the fact that we had those fight scenes, and I think they were done pretty well. And I also just see it as all of those are mini bosses. They're mini bosses to the Scar King and Shimo fights. So I don't think they had to be these extravagant fight scenes. I think they're all pretty cool, and I think them cutting away, at least for the Drowned Viper, makes sense because it's also done to show character moments. They're not short because they couldn't do it. They're short because they wanted to prioritize the character moments for the monsters. They cut away from the Drowned Viper kill because they had to show that how Zuko reacted to Kong finding him and then we see that he is scared of the punishment, but Kong doesn't punish him. And it goes to show um, the building of trust with Zuko and Kong, because he's able to see through his actions that he is different from any of the other apes and Scar King. And so that builds upon the relationship and how Kong's actions affect the story and the characters. And that's, I think that's good writing, if they're able to write scenes where a character's actions are perceived and affect other characters in a logical and satisfying way. I think that's good writing. Let's see. I have not been to G Fest, Goji Man. I would love to go. I probably likely can't go this year because I already have a vacation like immediately after G Fest ends, so I probably wouldn't have the time to go this year. So yeah, I would love to go. I hope I get to go some other year. I also don't have the funds for. I don't have the funds for it, but yeah, I would love to go. G Fest seems like a cool event. A lot of my friends have gone to G Fest and go to it. So I would love to meet up with some of my friends there in any future occasions. But yeah. And then back to Scar King. I know that like I've said before, I think there's elements to a story and character that could have been fleshed out more in the visual storytelling. There's the one thing too where a lot of people didn't make sense of what the whole quarry thing was in his lair and the whole ape tribe. Like what was the point of it? And if it doesn't have a point, then it's bad. And like it doesn't make sense for him to have his troops there. Because he would probably naturally any like dictator will want their people to flourish and be strong. Or it would make sense to him not to have like the people there. But I would say it's just a matter of streamlining and simplifying the message of what they want you to think of Scar King, because it's a trope in like it's a common trope to have a dictator or like this villain in power who like quarries are a common trope in that for those characters to where they have their prisoners in a quarry doing either needless or like basic functions, like they do it to get minerals for or materials for stuff or ore stuff like that for the weapons, which we do see they have weapons and they have uses for it, but I think it can easily just be a thing of just making them work for work's sake, just to keep them in line, keep them busy. Because as we see, Scar King instills controls through fear and pain. He instills fears in them by showing anyone who opposes him or doesn't do the job will get killed. We see the heads atop the spikes, like to remind what happens to people who don't do the job. We do see that he does treat others fairly well, his loyal servants. So there's incentive for people to obey him and like bootlick him or something, So there's that element to it. And again, you're able to easily get that across with Scar King. Is it simple? Sure. Is it effective? I think so. And then there's the whole thing of like, well, he's been down there for so long. Why isn't he doing anything? I think that's a valid take. I think it's something that narratively should have been explained. But again, there's things like I would say it's probably harder since Since there's no gravity inversion, they can't exactly go to the top and just get out. Um, and it's probably difficult for them to find any points of entry, because where they went into is probably a hidden cave. We see that there's bones in there, so that was probably from whenever the war was happening and stuff like that. But it was probably lost to time. And then there's the whole like Shimo thing. Like I think Shimo probably could, but her her power is more kind of like a hacks thing, I think, or in a similar vein. Because like her power isn't just to destroy things; it's she freezes, and sometimes she can destroy the things she freezes. But I think it would still take a lot of time to get to anywhere on the surface from any points outside of anything like the hidden cave that I think was found after the fact because um, I would assume because I would have to reread the novel because I know that Scar King was after Kong initially. Um, it's probably because of Kong's um, influence and his actions that Scar King and his troops were able to find the cave in the first place. They could probably sense Kong there. Let's see. GXK can't understand the portals. White portals is opening. We see they go to Brazil. Why? So the way the portals work is they're essentially these long tunnels, and in the tunnels, gravity is like um, extraordinarily strong there, to where if you go through them, you're essentially fast traveling. The gravity is pushing you so fast that you're fast traveling through the tunnels, and then you come out the other end, and then whatever gravity situation you're in. Because if you go to Hollow Earth, you'll hit the gravity inversion, and then you'll come. Essentially, you're going up, but because of the gravity, it's perceived as falling down. And a similar thing can happen when you go back to the surface, to where if you go into a portal too fast, you essentially are thrown into the air. And then the portals that take you to Brazil is we see there's like two portals are shown in the big Iwi village cavern. So one portal leads to Egypt, and then there's the other portal they went to that went to Rio in Brazil. So a portal can only take you two places, and that's where it goes in the Hollow Earth, and then back into where it goes into the surface world. Essentially, it's like a big well, and the gravity inside that well is so strong, it'll it'll take you there in an instant. And that's essentially what the portals are for. They're for fast travel into the Hollow Earth and out. Because if you were to go like just dig straight down, it'll take forever, realistically. So having the portals there is just a way to fast travel to and from the Hollow Earth. And then portals as well. The reason they'll open up in certain places is because, like the reason it opened up under Egypt was probably because the portal itself was in a deeper cavern, and so because we see multiple times in the movies that the portals themselves can be hidden within like deep places in the caverns. Like in Antarctica, it was like way down deep below the ice cave, and even in the Hollow Earth, like it's deep down into like these canyons and these caverns in the Hollow Earth. So they could be pretty far underground. We even see it in Monarch, to where one of them is like deep underground in the cavern. And I think if it's reopened again, it can suck in anything, and then open up a portal that way. And then there's the whole issue of of the opening itself too, in specifically the opening to the subterranean layer, to where like there's only one opening. It's shown that the sinkhole that Kong inadvertently opens up, that's the one opening, and it leads to a cave that that the apes find after the fact. Now that Kong is now that Kong has opened it up, and it's a way to the overworld, as I call it. I call it the overworld because it's like the first layer of the Hollow Earth, and then there's the inner or the underworld, to where that's like the area that's around the core of the Earth, essentially. And then there's the subterranean layer, which is on the overworld. But yeah, it's the one opening, and I think the reason is just that I think they either changed it geographically or visually, so that it looked better in the shot. But it's still implied that it's the same canyon that Kong was in, because we still see the blue crystals that line the wall, and so therefore it's implied that that's the one opening for it. Yeah, so that's the one opening. It's visually a little different. I think that's just for the shot. But because it still implies the same one, I don't think that's a technical flaw. And like I think we see similar things like that, because some instances the shots will be altered for the shot specifically, like the terrain. Like sometimes it'll appear closer to the lava, um, and then the next shot will be in a little bit of a different place, or the element will be gone. But I don't think that's a fault. I don't think it faults or holds the story back, because it's not inherently noticeable. And also, like, as different angles can make it seem it's closer than it was, but I don't think it's a. It could be a nitpick, I'd say. You can nitpick it if you want. I don't think it holds back the whole story. And then let's see. Actually, let's see. Ba, 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 ba. Let's see. I wonder if there is a. Is there a be right back thing? 'Cause let's see if I can share this. But yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else I can talk about as a defense. But I think I might just move on to the whole broader point of the monsterverse, because I think the state we're in now and the state going forward. Well, thank you, Goji Man. Good luck on your studies and your exams. Thank you very much for stopping by. Um, feel free to tune in anytime. It was a pleasure. But yeah. Save to share. Copy again. But yeah. Da, da, da. Mm. Well, have a good one, Goji Man. But yeah, like as I was saying, like the whole state of the monsters we're running right now. Like I think subjectively you can say bye bye, Goji Man. Subjectively you can say it's dying, but objectively it's never been better. Because I think even with the circumstances and like obviously without the Wingard films would have done very well either way. Because objectively speaking, again, I don't know how much this point is always brought up, but Godzilla versus Kong did save theaters. People went to the theaters amidst the latter half of COVID to go see this movie, and it did extremely well, given that it was also on streaming, and given that it was post COVID or mid COVID, I would say. Since it was only after this film that things also started to die down with that, and blockbusters started to come back into the limelight. Because I think Tenet came out before this, and Tenet didn't make the numbers, or GSK or GVK did relatively. So there's a lot going for it. And then we saw that it also wasn't a fluke, because Godzilla X Kong did far better. It's I believe it is the highest grossing monsterverse film globally, I would say. Excuse me. But yeah, it's very successful. The reviews overall were pretty well, with audiences and with critics. It was viewed less favorably, but not by much. I don't think by much it was. So we know that it's not like GVK was a fluke. It would have done just as well, I would say. Without COVID and without the streaming, I would say it would have done just as well. Because it was a very nice and wide appealing blockbuster. And I think that might cause some gripes with some people. But when you have mass appeal, you're successful. This film did that. Both the films did that. They had mass appeal. They catered to audiences in ways that, with simple stories and fun action, good moments, they appeal to massive audiences. And I would argue that the Wingard films are the most successful films of the franchise, and they're probably the pinnacle peak of what we have so far. Let's see here. I'll share some stuff on Instagram as to what I'm doing. I am now live. I've been live. I should have announced this, but yeah. If any viewers have anything to say, leave them down in the chat and I'll respond. If you have any criticisms, if there's any topics regarding GXK, I'll address them to the best of my ability right now. But, and maybe if there's anyone who's around, because I think, I don't know if any of my friends are available to chat. I was wanting to do this like a solo stream for the most part, because I just wanted to get my thoughts out, because I'm a pretty quiet guy when it comes to talking to people and discussing, because I'm more of a people watcher and listener. I like to see other people talk, and I like to interject whenever I can and have that discussion, because I've always said I love discussing things. I also love listening to other people discuss things. But let's see. Sharing some stuff. I did do a stream last night, the other day, with on the Zimcast. That was a fun one. But, let's see, shilling on the Discords. But let's see if this gains any traction. Oh yeah. Because again, this is mostly just about me. And like I was saying, like these films are probably the most successful of this franchise. Are they the best written? Debatable, in the sense that are there other materials that are better written in the monsterverse? Sure. Um, uh, I would say subjectively, I like how these films are written better than the other installments. Because I love Godzilla 2014. I think it's a near perfect film. Um, and King of the Monsters, I do like. I think there's some flaws with it that don't inherently outweigh the good that I see in it. It's sort of a middle ground to where there's things I don't like about the movie, and there's all the stuff I enjoy. It's a little bit bogged down by what I don't like. Um, but I still like King of the Monsters. Um, and then I love these two films because the stuff they do wholeheartedly outweighs any of the narrative flaws. Because I don't think they're the flaws are not as big as any of the other films. Like the only reason I don't think Godzilla 2014 is the perfect film is because it cuts away from the fights, and I think specifically if they had kept in the airport fight and actually shown it on screen, I would have been 100% satisfied, and I would say that's probably the best MonsterVerse film. But because there's more action, and not just action, but also character writing for the monsters in the two Wingard films, I think they're better for it. And the stuff there outweighs any of the bad in the films. That's my stance on it. And then furthermore, like I look forward to where we're going. I think Grant's Supporter will do a good job with it. I don't think the studio is gonna force him to have a story like the Wingard films. They might. I would say they would only like encourage a tone similar, just based on how successful they were. But I don't think they're gonna take any creative control away from him. I haven't seen this film. I am, or Mother. Is just Mother, or I Am Mother. But everyone who has, I've heard good things from it, and from the trailers and all the things people have talked about. It's pretty sci-fi heavy film, so I expect it'll probably be more sci-fi with the elements, and only in a similar tone to the Wingard films, which I look forward to. Because one thing I do love about the film, as I said before, is all the monster stuff, and getting more of that, I only look forward to. And honestly, after GXK, I've been craving more stuff like it. One other thing that I've come to really enjoy watching is Ultra Galaxy, I think Mega Monster Battle, and everything there is essentially what I love about GXK. It has awesome monster scenes. It has simple characters who I enjoy watching on screen. So I think again, Ultra Galaxy's Mega Monster Battle. I've been watching it on both YouTube and now on Tubi since I found it there. But it instills everything I love about GXK. When it comes to the monsters, the actions, the characters, the storytelling, it's all simple, fast paced, and like if you watch any of the fights from that show, um, it is like near identical to the stuff you'll see in either of the Wingard films. To where the monsters like fight in the style that's reminiscent of like wrestling and stuff, and like it's animalistic wrestling, which I really love in a kaiju fight. Like I really love the fights in the Wingard films. I think they're some of the best. And I'll say this right now: my favorite MonsterVerse fight scene is Godzilla versus the Ion Dragon. I think it's visually the best one. Narratively, I think there's stronger ones. Or that's also one thing. Like talking about the action in the Wingard films, I think they're all like underrated in the sense that people don't talk about them enough. Because from a technical standpoint, they're all pretty well done. Um, One thing I never understood is D-Man 1954. Love the guy, big fan. I've met him on several occasions, talked to him on several occasions. I'm always in the chat and most of his live streams. But I disagree with his claim that, or his critique that the like action is incoherent. Like one thing he always mentions is the real fight. If you pay attention, it follows all the rules that are required of a good action scene. For instance, there's the 180 rule, where you shoot from one side and you just go on like a 180-degree angle from like one shot to the next, so that way it's coherent. And the fight scene in Rio follows that rule, to where you stay on like one side of the line, and it always sticks to that rule, and it still has some pretty cool dynamic action. And the choreography is pretty well done. Like all the fight scenes are pretty extravagant, to where you have Kong and Scar King swinging through buildings. Godzilla and Shimo are like bulldozing through buildings as they tackle and throw each other. I love the scene where it calls back to GVK, where Scar King is now outrunning Godzilla's beam. And so there's a lot of cool choreography. I remember there's one post of this awesome animation, but people kept using it to like dogpile on Godzilla X Kong's choreography. And like the animation was good, but like it was essentially like two anime characters fighting, like a Dragon Ball Z fight. And they were saying that was better choreographed than anything in JSK. But it was all made on the presumption that like you were treating the fights not for what they are, which is essentially these large anthropomorphic, sure, but essentially large animals fighting. So they're not going to be like two anime guys fighting, which is, I think people would have complained, because then it would have been even more weightless. Which that's another thing. People talk about how this film is weightless and like it doesn't have a proper sense of scale. I would argue it does have a proper sense of scale, in terms of just the style that Wingard was going for. Because not only are we seeing these monsters now at a more in-depth character level, we're seeing things from their point of view. And even in the Hollow Earth and on the surface, the scale is still there, because you can see the environments and the way the characters still move and are designed. It's clear from the get-go that these are giant monsters. We have the context of them being giant monsters, so we perceive all of their actions through the lens of like giant monsters. We still do. And even though like the sense of scale is turned down, only in the sense of whether or not it's realistic. Everything here is done with a sense of style, to where we're focusing more on just like the overall action. And this is another thing. I mostly quote D-Man mostly because he's been a pretty sensible and good faith source of criticism, which I want to try to address here. I won't call him out or anything, but he did a video on the sense of scale and how to do it properly. And while I agree it's how to do it properly in the sense of how you want it to be realistic, but he compared the other thing to superheroes fighting. But I think doing it in a style to where it's like superheroes fighting is a cool thing. Because like I said before, other material has treated it that way, and I think it's good. Like the Showa era had some pretty out there fights, but like for the most part, I think, and like obviously there's a whole show comparison again. But like I said, there's other material outside of the Showa era, like Ultra Galaxy, um, that shows that like this style works. You can do it in any medium as well because it's all suitmation, and they're essentially one for one. To where they're not depicted as these lumbering beasts with the sense of scale of something like Godzilla 1954 or Pacific Rim, just to go into any medium. But you can have multiple styles to where the sense of scale is dialed back in sense of a more stylistic approach. I think it's fine to treat these things as superheroes because that's sort of just the approach Wingard wanted in order to have them be more focused on as characters rather than these um, large natural disaster level events, you know? Because um, you can treat an animal as a character, um, or you can treat them as the like this like for a actual force of nature, to where they don't have any explicit character motivations. They don't have explicit um, like inherent rules. Like there's still rules to how they act or how they work, but there's not express rules in terms of how to treat them as a character. And so when you have the sense of scale that it does, I think it's fine, and I think it's really cool. And in some ways, I prefer it, um, so that we get the cool action scenes. And like I said, I don't think it's done terribly because there's still a sense of scale. There's still a sense of weight to it. It's not as explicit and realistic as something like 2014, to where it has that approach of being realistic and immersing yourself into the world. No, it's you're immersing yourself in the fun of it all. You're immersing yourself in the action. You have the context that they are giant monsters already. So long as you don't go drastic with the changes, you'll still have that sense of scale. Because you're suspending your disbelief that these are giant monsters. I saw people flip flopping on the complaints too. People were complaining that there weren't giant sized plants, but then they also complain when the plants are small. Or they complain that you'll lose a sense of scale. Like you can't, like they say, oh, we want large plants, monster-sized plants. But then if they do, then we're losing the sense of scale. So like you can't have it both ways, I guess. I mean, there is because like there's massive trees in Hollow Earth, but then again, we also know that there are some massive trees in the real world. So you can easily imply the sense of scale because we know there are huge trees that get almost to the height of what Godzilla is. So you still have that sense of scale in the Hollow Earth, outside of it. It's stylized, but it's still there. And I enjoy it. I think other people can enjoy it. I think it's good to have it. I don't think it's a bad thing. Which I think goes a lot for what the Wingard films do. They have this style to them, and while there's technical flaws, the style outweighs them. I would say. And of course, it could probably be in a subjective sense, but I could argue for a technical sense objectively. Because I think objectively, you can still have things that have flaws, but they are still good in spite of them. I think it's true for both subjective critique and objective critique. So long as you acknowledge that there's objective flaws, but objectively, it's still also well enjoyed, and like it's so well written in these other places. But there's some elements that could have been better. Should they have been? Sure. Is it overall bad because of them? I don't think so. I wouldn't say so. I don't say so. Um, so yeah, there's that. And like again, I can concede the fact of all these flaws. I wouldn't point them out inherently because I can probably like see, well, but then that's where I go into my thinking mode. There's another issue I have with a lot of the people who defend, and this is with people who defend the movie as well. I don't like how people say, "Oh, just turn your brain off," or if they just say like "turn your brain off" or "it's supposed to be bad" or anything like that. I despise those, and I do not associate with any of those defenses, quote unquote, because it degrades your enjoyment of it. It degrades any merit that it could have because you're waving it off as it's supposed to be this way when it's not. And like I just can't stand it. Because whenever I defend something, it's out of a genuine good faith argument as to why I either like it or why I think this is actually pretty good. And so, like, just one thing I can't stand, which was the like just in general, like I just can't stand it. And because when I watch these movies, I don't turn off my brain. Um, I do think about the movies because, as I was saying, when there is something like um, when anything in the narrative either wasn't as thoroughly explained or as well explained, I use my brain to come up with some logical conclusions, and if I found them satisfying enough, I could suspend my disbelief. And on top of the fact that a lot of what I did like and what I found enjoyable, um, because of that and those elements, I was able to um, look past them, and all of the good was outweighed by any of the flaws, because I used my brain to work things out, analyze the film, come to these conclusions, and then tag along for the ride with it, suspend your disbelief, um, and then continue to enjoy the film. Uh, there's some degrees to where I think you should. Well, should you not have to think for any film? Like, should every film? Because like, then what's the implication there? Because I don't think you should have to turn your brain off in any case. I think it's good to always think about the films, have thoughts on them. So I would never say you should turn your brain off in any instant. Like, I think that when it comes to escapism, I think that like you always have to suspend your disbelief in one way or another for any film. But with escapism, I think there's a lot of stuff you can do if you do. Because the way I see it, I always thought of it that I'm relaxing my brain. I'm not thinking too hard, but I'm still thinking. I'm thinking about whether or not I enjoy the film I'm seeing, whether or not the events make sense. But I don't think it's bad if someone has to put in the work to make sense of it, because I think that's part of what suspending your disbelief is, because the way I see it, if I can make sense of something and be satisfied with it, then good on me and good on the film, because I think, and like this is all based because I use what's in the room to come to that conclusion, and if it's satisfying enough and it makes sense, then I think it's good on the film, because in some ways that's just me understanding what the filmmaker was intending, and if the filmmaker can make his intentions clear enough, and that's good writing. And I would say Wingard does that well enough. And of course, he wasn't the only writer. There's other writers in the room. And I think they did well enough job of letting us interpret things Um, could they have done more? Sure. Um, do I think they did a poor job? No. I think they did, again, well enough to where I was able to make my own conclusions based on what I had. And more often than not, I was right in those conclusions. When I got further context, when I read the external material, and it's not that I had to, I think it would have been fine because I think healthy speculation in any film is good because you can always talk about it and you can always think about it because, like I said, I don't turn off my brain in these movies. I enjoy them for what they are. I try to make sense of everything that isn't thoroughly explained to me. But again, I think that's part of the suspension of the disbelief, and it's part of, you know, not demanding that the writers explain every little thing, just so it makes logical sense. And I think there's definitely a degree to it because a Black Rooney, who is I would consider a good friend, um, I enjoy that he pushes me to, and I appreciate all he said to me either on the black screens or on the Zoomcasts. Um, all the respect I would say thrown my way, and the good I would say good faith put on me to explain myself. But I remember he was talking about his novel, or his story that he was writing, um, and I remember he said that he was stuck on the first two chapters because he wanted everything to make logical sense, but he still thought that it still came off as boring. And I would say, based on just that, I would say, in instances of that, I would say you can get away with not explaining everything logically, to where you can have something to where, um, let your readers come to those conclusions on their own. Um, either through setting up things in a way that it's common sense or common sense either in the broad sense or just in the context of the story, to where like a reader can easily come to those conclusions. Um, they can make those connections and then move on to the next event of the story. And that's the way I write things. I I, I try to keep things logical, but also like I just drop the basic hints throughout the story as to why certain things happen or as to why how this thing is set up. Because I feel let the readers, let the viewers, let the experiencers come to those conclusions on their own. You don't have to exposit everything. Um, you can go over some stuff because you have to put trust in the audience to understand and make those conclusions on their own. And I think GXK does that well enough. I think it does it pretty good um, in the sense that like a general audience can probably. I think they do, and they have. I've seen this before in reaction videos to the movie. They're able to come up with pretty logical conclusions and come out enjoying the film, despite the fact that not everything was thoroughly explained to one degree or another, for better or for worse. Um, they were able to come up with those conclusions and seemingly still come out with the sense that the film was overall enjoyable and both very pretty good. Um, it does it simple enough to where the conclusions you don't have to go that far to come to them. Because, like I said, I didn't really super analyze the film, but I was able to come up with certain conclusions to how things work and suspend my disbelief enough to where I was able to just come to these things naturally, and it was confirmed later on in the external material, like I said. See, so we're a little under 10 minutes away, or a little over 10 minutes away from the 2 hour mark. I will maybe I'll leave it there for some of my general thoughts, um, and let people respond. And then hopefully you can still hear me because I think my headphone just died. But yeah, there's that. Let's see, just got to test. Hello. But yeah, so there's that. So I might open the floor to anyone who might want to hop in. I don't know if anyone's online. This is a pretty early morning stream as well because I just decided I wanted to do this real quick. What's this? Let's see. I don't think any of my other friends are online. So I might close it off once the hour hits the 2-hour mark. But again, big thank you to everyone who showed up. Anyone stuck around, anyone who engaged and stuff. Shout out to them. And I guess I'll also take a moment to shout out some of my stuff for the break. But also, I do have commissions open, general commissions, plus some other deals as well there. Any support thrown my way will be very much appreciated. I do it all through Ko-fi, and it just helps me stay afloat since things with my normal job are pretty on the dwindling aspects of things. Not getting much work done these days. But I would love to work on drawings. So if you have any kaiju OCs or any OCs in general, personas, things like that, D&D characters, I can design your character, or I can bring them to life through my illustrations and artwork. You can find examples of them on my Twitter page, Vic Monstrous. You can find them on my Instagram at Crispy Vic. And then all of them should be in the card link on my bios and such, or my pinned tweets. I see where you can find my stuff through Ko-fi or Artistry or Vegan. I mostly use Ko-fi. It's pretty easy to work there. You don't even need to make a whole account there. But yeah, there's that. And then there's also the special charity one, to which everything funneled through there. It could be a donation of any amount too. But all of the proceeds from that specific special there go towards things like animal shelters, helping out with medical fundraisers. And then there's also the personal one that I'm doing, to where if you go through my Twitter or Instagram, you'll find the links to a personal fundraiser for my dog Charlie. He is in need of a surgery, and for covering the bills and such, to raise money through a GoFundMe. Would very much appreciate any support you can throw my way through there. It would help a lot. And then big thank you to all my friends like Zim, who gave a shout out there. I'll give a shout out to him back. He does a lot of cool stuff on his channel. You can check him out there. I make guest appearances more often than not. There's that there too. And then I also have a general trend going on where, if you saw his stream last night there too, I am doing a special chibi style. I don't know what you call it, but if you go show me some support on the tweet, like share, comment, like, and stuff, I'll draw you your OC chibi kaiju. You can find them there on my Twitter. I'm posting any of the new ones I've been working on. But there's that there too. let's see here. What else? There's a video in the works. It is mostly just taking forever to upload. I have an unboxing video where I unbox some of the new How to Train Your Dragon minifigures. They're pretty cool. So stay tuned for that, because hopefully it'll start to get uploaded soon. Hopefully it's almost ready. I'm still waiting on that one, unfortunately. I don't know what's going on with it, but hey, it is what it is. I need some technology upgrades, and your support through Ko-fi will help with that. Hi, Titan TV man. Welcome to the stream. Basically, I've been talking about Godzilla, Kong, the New Empire, and everything in the state of the monsterverse. I was saying that the stream right now is going to be starting to die down soon once I hit the 2-hour mark. Unless I see any of my friends online who might want to come on. Mostly because it's early for me, but for most of my friends, they're either East Coasters or they're somewhere in Europe. But as it is with some online friends, do you what? Yeah, Pacific Rim is awesome. I love that movie. Really good movie. I think it's that's about my summation of it. It's a really good kaiju flick as well as a mecha flick. It's weird because it's GXK also implies that there is a soon-to-be crossover. Because if you notice in GXK, you can see the schematics for Gypsy Danger's arm on a blueprint in that scene where it shows off the Beast Glove. So that sort of sets up a sequel, and they're both done by Legendary. So a crossover isn't too far-fetched. And I think technically we've seen Mechagodzilla, and there's also the external comic. My favorite character, if you're talking about like the kaijus or the mechs, my favorite character is Otachi, the kaiju. My favorite mech is probably Crimson Typhoon. My favorite human character is it's a toss-up between Mako or Newt. I identify with Newt personally because he's nerdy and into kaiju like me. So I identify with him, but I love Mako. I think she's cool. Those are all my favorites of Pacific Rim for whatever your discussion. Yeah, Crimson Typhoon is awesome. I wish I had a figure of him. I want to buy the McFarlane. Did McFarlane make the 4-inch figure? I have the Otachi 4-inch figure. So if they have a Crimson Typhoon, I'll see if I can pick one up soon. Because it is my favorite Jaeger. Let's see. Let's see. We're just under the 2-hour mark. If anyone has any questions, because again, this is a defense of GXK. So if you have a criticism you want to see me address, leave it down in the comments. If you like GXK and there's anything you want my views on it, feel free to do so. But other than that, I'll probably be heading out soon. Let's see. My video is at 30%. I tried uploading it yesterday because that's when I got the figures and filmed the video. But I don't know. Longer videos take a long ass time to upload. And it sucks. I don't know if it's just my internet or my hardware. But yeah. Let's see here. So hopefully I was able to express why I personally am a big fan of GXK, GVK to some extent, and also the monsterverse now as a whole. If anyone wants to share a response to this, feel free to do so. I might make more to address other criticisms I didn't get to. If anyone wants to have further discussions, if any of my good friends want to, either through here, because I would love to have you guys on, and such, as always. I didn't share it now because I didn't see anyone was online. It was also pretty early, so who knows how long it's going to fetch that for. But yeah, this may be something I come back to. Because again, I do love having these discussions. I don't want to dissuade anyone from talking about things, even if they make disagreements. Like Zim and I, we're best friends, or I consider ourselves really good friends. But we, our entire friendship was from the start was always disagreeing on Godzilla '98, which is my favorite Godzilla film. So, yeah. But again, I love talking about things even if we disagree. And that's the whole thing. So, yeah. Big thank you to everyone who hopped in again. Thank you for stopping by, checking out the channel. Please do like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below any more criticisms, praises when it comes to GXK or the monsterverse as a whole. And maybe I'll do a follow-up video on whatever any responses I get to it. But until next time, Kaiju Seekers, over and out.